let's start by looking at like what the value of the MBA is, right? It's not classes. I should just get that out of the way, because if you want to learn how operations work, dude, don't pay 200,000 for whatever, tuition is. Just go online. Like it's a Google search. Like you'll find hundreds of books, thousands of books on operations. You'll find articles, you find YouTube videos. To this day, I'm still using YouTube even for some of my MBA classes, right? Like Khan Academy never gets old. But the value of the MBA is it takes a bunch of work experience and it compacts them.
Hey guys, welcome to the Telugu Saga. Sai, how are you, man?
బాగా చక్కగా ఉన్నాను బ్రో నువ్వు
Bane unnanu, bro. How's NC?
NC, good to be back. It's treating me well. I think I traveled on a good day right before the elections were released. So no airports got, I wasn't stuck in any airport and it was a smooth ride. It came faster than expected.
That's nice, man. Like, I'm just looking at your background. I'm just remembering the other one. I was in the same room.
You're in the same room.
Yeah, that's where I was doing the work, right? Obviously. But how's your day going so far?
My day, pretty good. I woke up and there's this Telugu organization that does this matrimonial like get together. So I was just um, looking through what the groom and brides ask usually, and spending about an hour just to see how the calls goes and what each side is expecting. But other than that, yeah, watch some deep promos, ate cereal, and back at this podcast.
I thought you were gonna say Jabardast, man.
Zabardast, yeah, fell in love with just dance watches, the comedy and the skits in between. So I've been watching this full episodes.
Okay, nice. It's good to hear, man. Good to hear that you came back safely.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
during a pandemic, it's pretty crazy out here. All right, so I'm excited for today's podcast, man. Would you like to introduce the guest and topic for today?
Definitely. So topics today is about MBA, which we all waited to hear. If you had not yet told you need an MBA by your parents, you'll do you'll do so soon eventually. So just watch out for it. You won't even see it coming. So we all know that it's good to have an MBA degree or executive MBA, and we also see a lot of CEOs without these degrees. So the question now really is, do we need an MBA? Is it worth the money? Is it worth the time? Who better to speak to than the man who's currently studying at Ross School of Business? He did his bachelor's in biochemistry. He has his own podcast called The Brown People We Know, loves motorcycles, tea, I assume all sorts. We'll get to know soon. And climbing, I think he likes to climb everything, loves traveling. So, introducing you guys, Mr. Suraj Kandukuri. Welcome, man.
Yo, guys. It's quite the intro you're giving me. I can confirm that I like climbing everything. It's a big no.
What tea do you like then?
Dude, all kinds. So
Okay.
I used to not tea asli dale chinappudu, but like more recently, I think in college I picked it up. But now it's like when I tell people I like tea, they're like, "Oh, I like tea too," and I'm like, "No. I like tea." Like there's about
Masala
like
tea.
30 kinds. No, so mostly like a few of my favorites. There's a jasmine green tea that I actually bought in Beijing while I was visiting. So that one I love. But there is a French vanilla chai Twinings tea that you can just like get at the grocery store. That's pretty much my go-to for like tea bags.
Dang, I got hooked into this Tazo Passion, Purple Passion. It's herbal tea, but yeah, I'd love to learn about more about your China adventures. But Vishal, do you want to get these ball rolling?
Sure, Sai. So, Suraj, thank you for coming on. Sai is really good at, elevating the intros. We want to make sure we push you out there, and it's really nice to hear about your background. And we had discussions before this podcast as well. So let's talk about your career path and being your journey at like University of Madison, Wisconsin. You were studying bio and other minors. You said you took MCAT as a way to decide if you wanted to continue medical. Can you walk us through your thought process and the journey that you had there?
Yeah, man. So a little bit different from that. What actually like happened was even growing up, I always wanted to go to med school. Like I saw myself as a doctor, right? So coming into college, naturally decided to pursue that path. So I wound up as a biochem major. And I'll just kind of pause there. And I want to make a point that we often miss, which is with you hear this talk about like first generation college students, right? Indian Americans, I think a lot of us are in a weird position where our parents have been to college, but they haven't been to an American college, right? So I think there is a difference with first generation American college students because your parents went to college in a very different environment. They didn't know about extracurrics. They didn't explore all these different, like what are liberal arts degrees and those types of things. There's still advantages. They went to college, so they had the money to probably send us to college. And also, there was always the expectation that we would go to college because they had been to college. I felt when I first entered college that I didn't really know how to do it right. So my focus at the time was more just like, I want to be a doctor. That's the only thing I'm going to do. I'm going to focus, get my degree, get out. So I aimed for a 3-year path. I actually could have finished in 2 years, but I was trying to like get my extracurrics up. And then to your point, I had done like 150 hours of shadowing, including a few in India. I took the MCAT, and then I like kind of paused, man. I had this existential crisis, which was like I had been getting really good grades in my classes, but I didn't really enjoy them. I found that like I had to work a lot harder to get the same grades, right? Versus at the time I had a business minor and I was studying a few other classes, and I was like, man, when I'm in these classes, like that's where I really shine. So that was one thing that I noticed. The other thing is that like with the med path, you don't have to dive right in, right? So there's this really interesting idea that I've referred to a few times in my life, which is like when you're making a decision, make decisions that are going to further you no matter what the result is, or that won't close off the door, right? So if I go into med school, I've now shut off all other options for the next like 8 years, let's say. But when I decided not to and to kind of explore other career paths first, I always had the option of going back to med school. And now on my application, I could also say like, hey, I tried other things before I came back, right? So it actually would have improved my application. I think this was like probably the most stressful time for my parents. Like I had no clue what I was doing, but they had no clue what I was doing too. And so I think they probably had more stress about it than I did. But yeah, man, that was kind of some of the thinking that took me off the med path, and I'm happy to like chat about what came next. But
That's really cool, Suraj, because I think one of the biggest things is, when you get into college, right, you start off with a certain major. And this happens to a lot of, especially like, I don't want to down it to like a certain race, but notice a lot of Indians, they go into a particular major and then like in the first year, they're like, why am I doing this? They start to question it, right? And that's what I've seen. And then they start to find out other interests that they enjoy. Whether they're excelling in those classes or not, like they still have that passion towards it. And that's what I've seen. So that's
yeah,
also really nice for you to share.
let me tell you how stupid I was, man. Like when I entered college, I was a chem major. Okay, I go in and I take like the first day of my chemistry class, and I go, man, I really hate this. I really, really hate this. So immediately I go to like the administrative office for our college, and I go, I'm changing my major. And I changed my major to biochem. That's how clueless I was. I was like, this is going to be much more of a fit. Yeah. So to your point, I think like it's not even that we don't explore other things. I think like for us, a lot of us, maybe we don't even consider other things as options when we go in, right? And that prevents us from looking at other things.
చిన్నప్పటి నుంచి ఆ బయో మేజర్ మైండ్లో ఉండాక how did you think that it was shutting you off for the next 5 or 10 years?
Yeah, man. So like చిన్నప్పటి నుంచి like అంటే చిన్నప్పుడు you only know like 4 or 5 careers, right? I know what a doctor is. I vaguely know what an engineer is. Like you're not exposed to like all the different career options that you have. Some things you'll think like actor is there, and for some kids like they'll be like I can be an actor. For other kids, especially Indian American kids, you're like, ooh, like I'd get in trouble. Double stay definite, right? So like from that perspective, I don't even think it was like I walked in and said like being a doctor is the wrong thing for me. It was like I woke up to the fact that I hadn't really explored other paths, right? I think a really good way of painting this is actually looking at my hobby of like rock climbing, right? So Chinnapuru, my parents in high school, they had me play high school or middle school or something. They had me play tennis because that's what all the other Indian people were doing. It's the way to get into, you need it on your college application, right? Like some sport, of course, it has to be tennis. So like I played tennis, I didn't really enjoy it. I was okay at it, whatever. After I left college, I started working on my own. I was living in Chicago. And I've done some weird jobs there that are not weird, but like different jobs there, right? Every month I would sign up for some new class. So a month of dancing and a month of like cooking class. 1 month I took a rock climbing class. Basically what I was doing there, I wasn't like, this is the thing for me, right? What I was doing is like exposing myself to stuff. I found out that I really hate dancing, which probably is not a popular thing to say to Indian people, at least like the organized, like swing dance, that kind of stuff. But I really I love cooking. I love climbing, and climbing is something that I do to this day. So I was like a very active member in our Ross Outdoor Club because of climbing. So alage, I wanted to give myself the opportunity to expose myself to other career paths. And if you think about the MBA, it's very much a generalist degree, right? So when I was working in Chicago, initially I was still working in healthcare, but on the business end. Just given my background, easiest jobs to get. And I'm coming in with some context, right? So I'm not at a full disadvantage. Then after some time, I started to think like, చిన్నప్పటి నుంచి డాక్టర్ అవ్వాలనుకున్నాను అందుకే ఇప్పుడు డైరెక్ట్ హెల్త్ కేర్లోకి వెళ్ళాను. Why don't I pause and try something else? I used to volunteer a lot. So I was like, there was a nonprofit that I used to work for or volunteer with that they were opening a new location. So I ended up working with them and helping them and managing that site, right? Dude, so much fun. Like half my job was playing with kids. I like freaking love kids. So like it was just a really good experience. I felt like the work was really meaningful. And that was the moment for me where I said, and on top of the work itself, I should also add that it gave me the flexibility to continue rock climbing and doing these other things that maybe I wouldn't have as a doctor, right? I think whereas a lot of parents, I don't even know if my parents still hold this opinion, but I think a lot of parents, like the more money you get, the better, right? And my personal view has changed to where like the more money you get to a certain level, and then after that, I'd rather get my time above my money, right? So I'd rather have time to go climbing and doing those things. But so I'm working for this education nonprofit, and I decided like, man, I really enjoy this work. It feels meaningful to me. So I'm going to go get my MBA as a way of, instead of starting over at the bottom and like working my way up through nonprofit as I did with healthcare, instead I can get my MBA, use that as my credentials to jump to like a higher level management position at a nonprofit, right? Once I got here, things have like completely changed. So I did a bunch of consulting projects for nonprofits, and over time I became kind of wary of the one-way revenue flow, right? Like money goes into a nonprofit, doesn't really come out. I'm more and more interested in businesses that are self-sustaining and kind of like, I know Tom's is a quote unquote bad model and people frown upon like the buy one, give one model. But my larger vision there, my larger observation was that there are businesses that are doing lots of good, right? And so kind of left the nonprofit thing while I've been here, and I've pivoted. So post Ross, I'll be working in New York for a consulting company doing mergers and acquisitions, integrations for PwC. Actually, it's one of the big four for accounting.
At this point, you're pretty much a versatile person. You did a lot of tutoring. I stalked your Instagram. You do a lot of cooking, Japanese dishes, whatnot, and a bunch of sporting events. I know you love hiking and rock climbing and just outdoors, anything. I'm sure you would be up for it. And all this process is experimenting. And now with MBA, do you think you're still experimenting with it, or you're like, this is it, this is where I love, this is where I flourish?
Yeah, man. So there's two reasons to get an MBA, right? The first is if you're going to basically work your way up in the company that you're currently in, right? So a lot of my classmates, I'm at the University of Michigan, they're working at Ford, they come in, they come out, and they're just like a higher level position at Ford, right? The other option or the other reason to get an MBA is when you're trying to pivot career paths. So like, man, I studied medicine for a really long time. I don't want to do this. At that point, I was certain that I didn't want to do medicine. So I decided I wanted to kind of pivot more strongly into the nonprofit sector. So that's why I came here, right? I think I may have said this before, but the MBA is a generalist degree. It really applies anywhere. So coming back to your question of whether I'm still exploring, I personally am. When I came here, I wasn't, right? When I came here, I thought I was going back in the nonprofit sector, but just by my path through the MBA, I was exposed to other things. And so how I thought about my post Ross position, right, where I want to go. Mergers and acquisitions is something that's really interesting to me for two reasons. One, if you look at companies like Amazon and Google, increasingly instead of starting something organically, they're purchasing companies, right? So instead of Google starting its own like smart tracker, smart watch, they bought Fitbit. That's one thing, one trend that I saw that was interesting. The other thing is I am of Indian descent, but I grew up in Canada and the US, right? So there's a little bit of an international streak to me. I like to mix cultures. And alage, like mergers and acquisitions, a lot of them are happening across countries, right? So that stuff is all really interesting to me. So the side that I'm not exploring is like mergers and acquisitions. I've committed to that essentially by taking on this position. But I didn't commit to an internal company role, right? I decided to do consulting, which means that my clients will be from a lot of different industries. So that way I can continue to explore using something that I'm interested in as like a route. So this is one big observation I've had doing my own podcast, right? Where I'm speaking to Indian Americans, I'm understanding their experience. I'm able to then retroactively reflect and say, like, this is why I did these things. A lot of me figuring out this MBA path and the next steps in my career, it wasn't so straightforward to me in the very beginning, right? Like a lot of it has been me going like, oh, I find mergers and acquisitions interesting. I don't know if it's exactly what I want to do, but then once I get the position, I'm like committing to it, right? And then you can kind of talk your story back. Hopefully that made sense.
That's pretty cool. I like how you said the mergers and acquisition and how, you found some patterns and all of that. So when you said you went from like looking into the nonprofit to more the commercial, the more business side of things, did PwC come in as a way of, did it change your mindset? And how was your internship there when you're working?
In terms of leaving the nonprofit sector, so PwC, there's a few reasons why I pursued it. One, a lot of consulting firms, they'll come in, they'll tell you you're a generalist consultant, right? Whatever problem a business has, they'll throw you at that. PwC was one of the few firms where I could focus on mergers and acquisitions. So coming in, I could tell them like, that's what I want to do. Don't put me on like market entry projects and those types of things, right? Just put me on that. The other thing is like it is a very people focused firm. So there were some firms, dude, where I felt like, man, like I'll probably have to live in a suit and a tie. And as Sai just said, I'm like very outdoorsy and stuff. I'm laid back, right? Like I don't want to. I don't know. It's just not the culture I want to be a part of. PwC is a very like, dude, just lots of joking around with my coworkers. Like we would always have chats about this. One time, like this dude came into a meeting wearing a shirt that had penguins skiing on it, and me and one of my coworkers like just like lost track of the meeting because we are just like chatting about his shirt. We were working too. I'm just in case my boss is listening, my future boss. So the people centric aspect and the mergers and acquisitions aspect, those were the things that drew me to PwC, right? And so then I did have to reconcile like, man, I just went from helping these kids get access to like free tutoring and like, these are families that kid is like their way up, right? It's the same thing with us, like the family's investing in the individual, right? And often through the medium of education. So I had to reconcile with that when I went into consulting. And there's no perfect answer here, right? Like I think it's a mix of what I want to do, what I feel I can do, balancing like the desire to have a stable lifestyle and all these different things. For me, the impact side of things, not social impact, but purely on the impact side of things, the reconciliation that I made was I'm working in consumer markets, right? So like Walmart is not a client, but the clients are companies like Walmart that you'll touch every day. So though I'm not having an impact in the education space, like I'm working on products that my friends, that my family, that I will be touching outside of work, right? The actual social side of things, like the social impact, I think one of the things that the MBA has really done is grow my perception of like what my career is. In fact, this actually started before I came into Ross. When I was working in Chicago, I was on the junior board of two different nonprofits. So kind of realizing that, okay, hey, I have these certain hours that I'm doing my like day job, but I can continue to do other cool projects like you guys are doing with this podcast, where you're like building a community. And those things end up being a part of your career. So whatever social impact I want to have, I think I can also do that outside of my career.
When you said MBA does two things, one helps you promote in a better position than where you're existing, and one for career switching. Is it faster to get promotion through MBA than to have an actual like working experience within the same company for a long time?
Yeah, that's a good question. So let's start by looking at like what the value of the MBA is, right? It's not classes. I should just get that out of the way, because if you want to learn how operations work, dude, don't pay 200,000 for whatever, tuition is. Just go online. Like it's a Google search. Like you'll find hundreds of books, thousands of books on operations. You'll find articles, you find YouTube videos. To this day, I'm still using YouTube even for some of my MBA classes, right? Like Khan Academy never gets old. But the value of the MBA is it takes a bunch of work experience and it compacts them. So I've had actual projects with real businesses while I was here. I've been able to gather a lot of experience very quickly, right? The other thing, probably the biggest thing, is the access to the companies that it gives you. This is why I think not every MBA program is equivalent or worth it, because companies like PwC just aren't going to every school, right? And so you're limiting your options. Then there's also the alumni networks and all these other things as well. But majority of the value that I've drawn out of the MBA has been from the recruitment aspects of the companies coming here, and then a little bit of like the network aspect. Though I will say like the network aspect for me thus far has paid off much more on a personal level in terms of like making friends than on a like financial or career level, right? Down the line, maybe it'll help in that way. So that's the value of the MBA. And then in terms of what you're asking about, like getting a promotion at your job or moving to the next step, I think it's the same way as applying to a job, right? You have to have the skill set required for that next position. And a lot of times, like this is pretty common for my classmates, which is they're engineers by trade, right? So they have all the technical skills for engineering, but if you were to show them a financial statement pre-Ross, maybe they wouldn't have been able to decipher it as comfortably. Or like management, dude, management is so undervalued. I think people are just like in their head, it's like driving, right? In theory, everyone's good at it in their head, but like once you put like people on the ground, it's actually like really difficult to take even a team of 10 people and to influence them and bring them in the same direction, right? Much less like if you're at the top of an organization with millions or hundreds of thousands of people. So that is like something that those engineers have to learn, and the MBA gives them the opportunities to do that again through those like compacted business experiences.
Do you feel like people just want to have their name, comma, and then MBA? Are they doing this for the namesake? Or when you got into the program, like, did you see like people actually being serious about it? Or what's your take on that?
Yeah, I think people generally are pretty serious about it, right? So with something like medicine, like the MD, there's a prestige attached to that, those initials, right? Especially in the Indian American community. But MBA, I think it doesn't really, it has the like, okay, this person got their master's, higher education. It has a seriousness about it, but it doesn't have a prestige to it. So I think for the most part, people are here for the right reasons. I would say the wrong reason to get an MBA is probably because you're like not sure what the next step is, right? And that's not to say, again, like when I started the MBA, my goal was completely different. So I started it and I'm ending it with two very different paths, but at least I came in with an idea of what I wanted out of it, right? The biggest downside to the MBA is the cost, and there's no way to like downplay that. But if you're intentional and you kind of use it correctly, I think it pays back its dividends.
I was told I won't get married if I don't have an MBA, and it's gonna get scary here in a while. So I would eventually have to do MBA, but I can't answer my parents on what I'll get out of it after MBA. Like I really want to pursue more technical side of my information systems or computer engineering. I rather get a master's in that technical side than MBA, but I definitely don't have an answer to like, first of all, I'm not really good at technical anyways. And if I do MBA now, when you're 24, I'm not going to get a promotion like a general manager in my technical company, which I don't think that's how it works. So does when you take an MBA matter? If so, is it for everyone? Like, I guess it's based out of your interests, right?
Yeah. Dude, I just really quick want to touch on the marriage thing. So I'm on the younger end of my MBA class. I was like, coming in, I was like, oh, I'll get to meet some people. I'm not sure if I don't know how I got in, dude. I think being married or in a serious relationship is like a prerequisite for the MBA. Most of my classmates are taken, but that's just, whatever. So yeah, I can see why they're telling you to get married before, or no, they're telling you to get your MBA before you get married.
Yeah, for most marriage proposals, which I heard today, most of them want settled and high professional education. High professional education is what is our topmost MBA, right? Screw the bachelor's because that's a waste.
And then the thing you were saying about the technical skills, again, it comes down to a couple different things. Like if you're coming here, you can recruit at other companies that are looking for the MBA skill set, right? If you don't find that you enjoy what you're doing right now in terms of the technical skills, then maybe you want to pivot. And like if you're doing project management, your technical skills then become an asset and not something that detract, right? Like if you're an engineer and you're maybe not, like, let's say you're doing a 5 out of 10, you got like B's or C's in all your engineering classes, like you're okay as an engineer, like but if you're an MBA and you have like C level knowledge of engineering, that actually turns into an asset because now you at least have the background to be able to speak to engineers, right? So this is why when I'm working with someone in healthcare, I can talk about CPT codes. I can talk about like different tests that they may have administered, and I'm not like, when I worked for a spine surgery center, they would throw like terms at me like a herniated disc and I wasn't like completely lost, right? So it's an asset in that way.
For an individual, a student that doesn't know anything about MBA, would you say MBA is just this degree that teaches you business, how it works? And if you want to take MBA, know the reasons, what you want to get out of it, like you said, what would be the requirements that you would look for in a college before joining their MBA program?
Like I said, I'm on the younger end of my class. I think if you can get into a good program, right? Like a Michigan or a Stanford, a school where companies come to recruit, or that has some prestige behind the name, you're much better off because right now I think MBAs are going to become like increasingly common, right? And so in terms of timing, when you can get into those schools, you're good to go. And the reason I say that is because they are also evaluating you as a candidate and assessing your readiness for the program, right? I thought I was too young when I was applying, but I was kind of like I had this aspiration to jump in nonprofits, so I applied. And I had that conversation with the admissions person, and her thing was like, "No, you look ready to go." And I think, like, not to toot my own horn, but while I've been here, I think I've really flourished. I was like class VP. I've been in random clubs like the outdoor club and the whiskey club, but I was also like doing all these nonprofit projects. Like I got a fellowship where they put me on the board of a nonprofit. There's like a competition consulting nonprofit thing that I had won. So, I've been able to make the most of my time here. The environment here is like genuinely very collaborative. I would not have gotten a job if my friends hadn't like mock interviewed me for jobs that they were also applying to, right? So super collaborative, but I just had to be aware of the fact that I was applying with 4, 5, 6, sometimes 10 years less work experience than some of my classmates. And I had to justify why I was still a good candidate, right? So that would be the downside, that you might have fewer like work stories for your interviews, that your resume has fewer jobs listed. Yeah. So other than that, I think timing wise, if you can get in, you're good to go.
Would you mind sharing a couple of the reasons that put you ahead of those classmates that are 10 years more experienced than yourself?
It's really the same stuff that helps you anywhere else in life, right? Being willing to be uncomfortable. So like when we first started, I remember we set up a Slack channel, right? This big giant group thing, and no one was really posting in there, but like, I posted, I set up the first class social. So I was doing these things to where like I was able to earn that like class VP position, right? People voted for me not just because they liked me, but because they knew me like on a fundamental level. Like this is a brand new cohort of people. People are still getting to know each other, but they've seen my name pop up a few times in that thing, right? So that kind of added to my resume a little bit. Like people were able to see that I was doing things at Ross. But dude, the other minor point I'll make is like just your interaction with people, right? Like when I was in an interview, the fact that I was able to joke around and get excited about things, and I had hobbies like rock climbing, I think that made me someone that people wanted to work with, hopefully. But the other thing, the big thing is really your story, dude. Like those people have 10 years of work experience, but the thing that the company knows is like Jacob got into Ross with 30 years work experience and Sai also got into Ross, right? On a fundamental level, when I bring either of them into my company, they can do the job. I know for a fact that they can do the job because Ross, that's the whole purpose of Ross giving them their degree, right? Like they're credentialing that person to say this person is capable of doing the job. So now I want to work with interesting people that have like some sort of a story to show me like they actually are going to care about this job. So for me, when I spoke about being Indian but growing up in Canada and the US and how that relates to mergers and acquisitions, like that story probably stuck with that interviewer beyond our interview, right? It's unique to me, not anyone that could have walked into that room could have said that. But the other thing that I was saying about Amazon and Google using it as a tactic, yes, it's genuine, it's real, but like anyone could have said that, right? So I think that is really important, just honing your story and being someone that people like want to work with. I'd say the process to some extent is similar to applying for jobs while you're here, right? You can't get past the GPA, GMAT thing. Like I think that's just that is what it is. But when it comes to your essays, like does this person have a story? And for me, and I should say like when people tell stories, they forget the elements that make up a story, right? There's a beginning, there's a middle, there's an end. There should be some friction in the story. And like you can kind of make that not make that up, but exaggerate it, right? Like, so like my story was like, man, like I just graduated and I didn't want to do medicine anymore and I didn't know what to do. And then I found this nonprofit thing and it was like, but there was a buildup to like, I came from this identity and like, I had only limited exposure to careers as a kid. But on top of that, there's this Indian American thing, this immigrant thing, I should say, of like, people should pursue stable careers. Like that's what's valued, right? Stability, which is ironic because I think if you like stability will get you to a certain place in your career, but if you really, really want to reach the top, like you have to take risks, right? You have to take jumps and leaps. But I was able to talk about this thing of where I was from, and then that created friction, right? But then like I paused at this moment, I look back, like wasn't stability wasn't the value that mattered most to me. Medicine was just one of a few careers that I considered. And so then I went on to explore and found this thing. And this is why I'm coming to Ross. So again, like, I don't think it's GPA, but story and having a reason and kind of tying those two things together is what's important.
So the highlight is tap into your story, right? That's what I got from you. And
Yeah.
I've not been doing that. I've been just giving answers like, yeah, I graduated. This is the place and city I graduated and I had this GPA and yeah, normal life, man. Yeah. I didn't, yeah.
Let me add two more things to that, right? The first is when people come in with those answers, they expect like, I should be able to talk about myself, right? No, like it takes hours and hours of preparation. I went through to answer that specific question. I went through iterations of designing my story, and like I had to present it to people, and then I realized, man, this sounds weird, that type of thing, right? So first, like it takes prep. It takes so much preparation. I think people don't they underestimate. And even I did before coming into Ross. Now that I'm at Ross and I have to compete against these really smart people with like, handsome faces and like nice suits. I'm like, man, I gotta get my story like really good. So that's one thing. The other thing is, I think people feel the need when they're telling their story to impress the other person, right? And so what they do is they take their entire resume and they condense it, and then like, this is who I am. And there's two problems with that. One is like, your resume doesn't have all of you. Like, I'm guessing you guys maybe have a line in your additional section about this podcast, right? But probably when you look at your day-to-day life, this is a much bigger part of your life than a single line on at the bottom, right? So tying in those things, and then also recognizing, like, when you tell a story, like, how annoying would it be if you were reading a book and the book kept going on tangents, right? So don't include your entire life or your entire work experience into that tell me about yourself question. Again, focus on building friction, telling a good story that ends at that job or at that MBA school. And then all the tangents, just trust that throughout your interview, they'll ask you questions where you can bring those in, right? If they ask me, tell me about a time when you had a conflict, then I can draw from that other work experience and bring it up and show them, like, impress them and show them I'm a good candidate, right? But really build all of your preparation around stories, and make sure that, again, you're beginning, middle, and end, and it's like focused.
That's the most eye-opening thing that I didn't know it would come out of this topic. A lot of us from the IT background, they only focus on technical questions. Okay, tell me about this networking question. What is cloud? So we oversee personal questions because it doesn't matter. We think it doesn't matter, but companies who truly care, like I'm sure PwC really loves that about you, and companies do care. They take both sides, the technical side and your personal story, into account because that's just how we function.
Yeah, man. Makgura, like a case interview untadi. So they'll actually give you a business case and you work through that. And then dan tarvata behavioral untadi, or sometimes it's the other way around. And like, I know for my preparation, when I was initially going through it, I fell into that trap of focusing on the cases, right? I was doing a lot of practice cases, but I wasn't practicing answering questions like, tell me about yourself and that type of thing. But no, I'm really glad that you highlighted that. Sometimes we can just, because interviews have both a technical and a personal aspect, we can really emphasize the technical aspect, right?
Sometimes you can do well in behavioral and do shitty on technical. They'll still take you, and I've seen those cases happen. And it's thank you for bringing that. I'm gonna apply this principle for next next round of interviews. So thank you for that.
Sure.
All right, we're ready for rapid fire, Rochelle.
How are you spending time during the last few months, or not even few months now? It's more than a few months, but during lockdown, during COVID, like how are you spending your
Yeah.
time?
So rock climbing is my way of clearing my head and keeping healthy, and the climbing gyms have been closed. So I've really doubled down on podcasting, which has been like my other hobby. So Brown People We Know, which you mentioned, I've been interviewing Indian Americans, and I do everything on that, from hosting to editing to publishing. The other one is Working for the Weekend, which is a podcast for the business school. I'm executive producer on that one.
That's really cool. Um, what do you occasionally do that keeps you like close to the Telugu culture, especially when we're not home with our families? Like it could be as simple as watching movies, cooking Indian food, speaking Telugu with family, going to temples, cultural dances, and stuff like that. So what do you occasionally
Yeah.
do?
So dude, movies 100%. Like చిన్నప్పటి నుంచి like Telugu నేర్చుకోవడానికి కూడా సినిమాలు చూస్తుండే. I just remember I used to watch the subtitles, and then one day I turned the subtitles off on accident or something. I was like, whoa, I can understand this. Like, like, that was like a big moment for me. But the interesting thing is, this might take a whole episode on its own, but when I was younger, I didn't have that many Indian friends. But once I came to Ross, I've really bonded with the Telugu community here. I think like this year, even last year, like I'm one of few Indian Americans in that group, right? Like a lot of them are actually international students from Hyderabad. So they definitely keep me on my toes in terms of like staying connected to the culture. I know when the holidays are because one of them will mention it, and they'll make fun of my Telugu frequently, but it's still someone that I'm able to speak Telugu with, so it feels good.
You said you watch movies and stuff. I mean, who's your favorite Telugu actor?
Dude, it like pains me to say this because I watched Disco Raja, but Ravi Teja is my favorite. I don't know what Discoraja was. The director on that was like should be fired. but dude, actually last time Chinnapuru, like India Kalnapuru, I think it was like 8 years ago or something. I told my mom, like, Mom, when I go to India, I'm gonna meet Ravi Teja. She's like, no, you're not. Be quiet. Like, dude, I went there and like through like my mom's friends person that goes to the same gym as Ravi Teja or something, I ended up meeting Ravi Teja. I also ended up meeting Venkatesh and Ali. Like, it was hilarious. It was like really mind blowing. I think you don't believe it's happening, right? Like, you're kind of like, wow, this is crazy, but really cool. And he was like very humble, down to earth. Like, it wasn't. He was talking to like my whole family. He wasn't just like looking at me or anything. It was a good experience.
That's cool.
Yeah, Venkatesh actually, I bodyguard Sinmaniga. I went to like the filming of it, so I actually got to meet him on the set. That was really cool because I got to like watch how they do the takes and stuff.
Yeah, I'm low-key jealous, man. But you do you. I'm gonna keep in touch with you for both MBA advice, and if I go to India, like I need those contact numbers as well, please. What keeps you going every day?
That's a tough question, man. Especially nowadays, the world is really, really big, right? There's so many different people, activities, foods, places, all these different things. And like, I just want to be exposed to them, dude. I want to get to know them. I'm like learning Japanese right now. I've kind of put that on hold for a little bit, but like I've been studying Japanese. I told you I went to Beijing a while ago, but really like wherever I can, I like to expose myself to things. I was taking all those different classes, right? The cooking class and the swing dance class and stuff. I think the pandemic has made it a little bit harder to kind of pursue that thing, and I feel like that has kind of drawn out some of my energy. And I don't say that to complain. I think like obviously we're in a good position, but I definitely want people to know that if they're feeling a little more lax lately, like they're not alone.
Is there someone who inspires you?
Yeah. So the people that tend to inspire me the most, like Alex Honnold is a really good example, or Muhammad Ali. It's people that have like their values and they stick to them almost no matter what, right? Like Muhammad Ali threw away a gold medal from the Olympics because of racism, basically, and or I think it actually was because of the draft at the time. But he stood up for a lot of issues. Alex Honnold is this rock climber that's very into environmental issues. Dude, like I don't know if you guys have seen the Free Solo documentary, but it may have been in that, may have been a different video. But I saw like even when he's showering, he like keeps his clothes in the shower with him as a way of doing laundry to like save water. Like it's not like a specific value that stands out to me, but just those people that really stick to their values. It's something that I aspire to, and like aspire with a capital A, right? Like I think it's very difficult to do, but very inspiring.
Man, thank you so much for answering those questions. And the crucial questions were mainly from the MBA. The vibes I got from meeting you, learning more about you, you're literally doing everything that one wants to do. Like your medical industry, you did MBA, you're doing MBA, now you're working a great job. You're at a personal level, you reached out to us, and that meant a lot for me, at least. And from then on, we shared conversations here and there, and the most approachable person. And I still don't know how you had time for this podcast, even though we mentioned like literally 3 days ago. Just everything about you has been, like Vishal said, we've been digesting, and it's continuing to inspire us. So thanks for your valuable time, and I truly mean it. Yeah.
I really appreciate you guys having me on, but also I appreciate that first of all. So thank you. It's like very humbling to know that someone looks up to me, because I think sometimes, yeah, I don't know, we can be harder on ourselves and stuff. No, I appreciate those kind words, but also just wanted to say thank you because I know I reached out to you guys kind of randomly, but it was inspiring to see another pair of podcasters that do Telugu podcasts. Nadi ante, like I do Indian Americans, right? So like it's cool, but I think when we meet other Telugu Indian Americans, there's definitely like a connection into it, sparks something. So I was very happy that you guys were receptive, and man, I didn't even know if Facebook would like let my message through, because it was like, that whole thing on the back end. I didn't know if it ended up in spam, but yeah, no, thanks for having me on.
Thanks, man. And I want to share a few words about your podcast. So Suraj has this Brown People We Know podcast. Is the most professionally made solo person. He brings out all brown people. From what I noticed, mostly from Michigan, but he's trying to expand. I can see, but he he got some wonderful guests ranging from, you know, his personal friends to people who ran for office,
Yeah,
uncles who've been here for a long time, people who are going through their own medical careers. And I've been up to date. And what makes me go back and listen to his podcast is the humor, the story he tries to pull out from his guests. And it's the whole entirety of the way he lays out the podcast. Is It's very something to learn from fellow podcasters ourselves. So that was,
thank you.
yeah.
Appreciate it.
I just right now, like, I mean, I had MBA in my head, just keeping that thought. I just want to end the podcast and start studying for the GMAT. Like that's how that's how I'm inspired, you know. It only takes what, like an hour call to or something, right? Even just a few words to inspire someone. So I feel inspired by you. I will let you know my journey with with studying and like trying to get into MBA. But I appreciate you coming on. It's valuable time, and it's a free podcast, right? Like this is like some free information, and I hope people viewing this, guys, this is a really cool podcast. Please do listen. But yeah, I appreciate it. I appreciate you
And I
coming
just
on.
want to open the door for you guys, obviously, like anytime you have questions about the MBA and stuff, feel free to ping me, but also for your listeners, I think like, again, it's a community, right? So I'm happy to help if I can do a resume review or if people just have questions. So reach out.
Thank you for that. All right, guys. So thank you for listening to the Telugu Saga. We had a good podcast today with Suraj, and we hope to keep you entertained with next week's podcast. All right. Goodbye, guys.